Hello everyone, this is Rajeshwari. Today we are going to see a poem, The Retreat, written by Henry Vaughan. So Henry Vaughan was born in the year 1621 and died in 1695. He was a Welsh metaphysical poet, an author, translator, and then he used to write in English. And he was also a medical physician. This poem, The Retreat, which was published in his poetry collection called Silex Indolence, which published in the year 1650. This poem, The Retreat, is a metaphysical poetry. So before we start the poem, we must know what is meant by metaphysical poetry. So this is a genre of poetry which usually deals with great and intense subjects like spirituality, religion, and love. Poets they usually use figurative languages, paradoxes, and philosophical topics in the poem. So these are the characteristics or the qualities of a metaphysical poetry. Okay, then start the poem. Happy those early days when I shined in my angel infancy, before I understood this place appointed for my second race, or taught my soul to fancy aught but a wide celestial thought. So here, uh, actually, Henry Vaughan who beautifully chosen each and every word to convey the emotions of lost childhood, and at the same time, he portrays innocence of childhood by collecting events from the past. Here, the speaker begins the poem by praising the days of infancy, the blissful state of infancy. The poet here keep on stressing the fact that childhood is a time of happiness. So infants are equal to angels, or the stage of infancy is a time of purity and innocence. Childs or infants are always nearer to God. This is a common concept. So it is because of their pure and crystal clear heart. But he couldn't be there in the same stage of infancy for long because before he understood the value of that precious stage, he moved into the next stage of his life, that is adulthood. He doesn't have any other thoughts during childhood except the thoughts of heaven. He was nearer to God during that stage of childhood. Here in this poem, we can see the term white, the white celestial thought. So the term white represents the symbol of purity and innocence. Here in these lines, the poet mourns for the loss of childhood. He is mourning for the loss of childhood. He is lamenting over the loss of childhood. Here we have a poetic device called metaphor. Metaphor is a very common poetic device, right? It is nothing but a figure of speech which states that one thing is another thing. Actually, it is a comparison of two things that are not alike but they do have something in common. So, angel infancy. The quality of an angel is compared to an infant, or the stage of infancy is compared to the qualities of an angel, right? Moving on to the next slide. When yet I had not walked above a mile or two from my first love, and looking back at that short space, could see a glimpse of his bright face, when on some gilded cloud or flower my gazing soul would dwell an hour, and in those weaker glories spy some shadows of eternity. Here the poet tells that during childhood or infancy, he had not traveled far from heaven or the Almighty. The God was his first love. Though he has crossed the stage of childhood, still he could feel the purity or power of his brightness, the bright face. He could feel the presence of God in his childhood through the natural objects like cloud and flowers. These heavenly beauties, which reflect through these natural objects on earth. He could feel the power and purity of eternity through those weaker glories, that is, the natural objects. Next one. Before I taught my tongue to wound my conscience with a sinful sound, or had the black art to dispense a several sin to every sense, but fell through all this fleshly dress, bright shoots of everlastingness. Here, the poet or the speaker of the poem emphasizes the concept that during childhood, everyone would be nearer to God, but once he grows up, he would be slowly detached from that power. A child's heart is purer than the adult's heart. Once he grows up, his mind would move slowly behind the worldly pleasure or earthly pleasure, and that is the human nature. But at the same time, a child, his heart or mind would be pure and clear, and that would be free from earthly substance, earthly stuff. So during infancy, through his body and mind, he felt that blessings of Almighty. He could feel the presence of heavenly glory or the God. Here we have examples of alliteration. As we all know, alliteration is nothing but repetition of consonant sounds in a single line. So here we have a sinful sound, then several sin. Two examples of alliterations we can see here. Consonant sounds are repeating in the same line, in the single line. Next slide. Oh, how I long to travel back and tread again that ancient track, that I might once more reach that plain where first I left my glorious train, from whence the enlightened spirit sees that shady city of palm trees. Here we can see the speaker's intense desire to go back to the past, the days of his good old memories, or that golden days. He extremely wishes to return to his childhood to feel the same power of heavenly glories. He wanted to reach that same path where he left his glorious days. The city of Palm is considered as Jerusalem, the land of God. Here we have imageries. Two lines we have there for imagery. So imagery um, is also a poetic device. The use of this device is to create crystal clear description in the reader's mind. Through imagery, readers will get an idea or image in their head. This will help the reader to get a clear picture about the poet's concept. But my soul with too much stay is drunk and staggers in the way. Some men a forward motion love, but I by backward steps would move. And when this dust falls to the urn, in that state I came return. Here the speaker suddenly remembers the fact about his present. He realizes that he cannot return to the past, to those days of childhood, because he has been strongly influenced by the worldly pleasure. He says that usually people wish to move forward or to the path of future, but here he wants to return to his past to feel the presence of Almighty. Eventually, he satisfies himself by telling that hereafter, only after his death, he can visit that place of purity. His intense wishes to move to the past mentions here his spiritual progress, to have communion with the God. He wants to go near the God. Here we have examples of paradox and imagery. Imagery we have already discussed, and paradox, it's a statement which contradicts itself, but might be true, which can make sense and convey deeper meaning. That is paradox. Here we have two lines for paradox. So, as a whole, the poem is completely filled with the poet's emotional attachment with the god. The speaker was mourning for the loss of his childhood, because only in childhood a soul can go nearer to God. During that period, a child or the soul of a child can have a communion with the God. It's because of purity and innocence of the heart. Whereas once he grows up, the soul of the same person gradually detached from the same heavenly glory. As it is the nature of a man, he would be influenced by the earthly affairs. Childhood was the golden period where he experienced the vision of heaven. So when the poem ends, he believes that he can experience the same heavenly glory after the death. The themes of the poem innocence of childhood, recollections of childhood, and nostalgia of the past. All the three concepts we have discussed here when we have seen the poem, right? Innocence, recollections, how the poet depicts the concept of innocence of childhood, then how he has collected memories from the past, how he has recollected memories from the past, and how he longs to go back to his past. He wants to move to the good old days of his past, the childhood. So that's all. Hope you all understood. Thank you.